Welcome back to the ND on NBC Podcast. Guys, this is a fun one for me. Kind of an overview, right? As we come out of the bye week and we're going into the USC game, we're presented by Under Armour, as we always are. Doug Farmer, Corey Robinson, thank you guys very much for being with us. And let's start with the quarterbacks, right? I don't know where else we could look beyond the quarterback position. It's one of the most intriguing quarterback rooms that I could ever remember. It's not like you can lock in on one guy or go, this young guy's the path that we have to go. It just seems like we're always bouncing. Every time that the Notre Dame offense runs on the field, you're like, who's it going to be this time? So, Corey Robinson, the state of that quarterback room right now, what would you say it is?
Jac Collinsworth. That's the official word. so there is the state. But I think it's interesting because we've seen I don't know how to describe this other than maybe a roller coaster. It's interesting because at the beginning of the season, it was Jac Collinsworth and then a Buckner package. And, in case of emergency, break glass and Drew Pine would come out. And then it came to a point where they said, okay, well, we want to have one quarterback. We can't keep doing this. Then due to injuries, due to lack of, poor performances, we find ourselves with different starters. And then now going into USC week, we're back where we started. Jac Collinsworth starts us off with a Buckner package, and coach said, in case of emergency, break glass, and we'll send in Drew Pine. So that's the state. It's back to week one.
I keep thinking back to Jac Collinsworth's performance at Florida State. 366 yards, 4 touchdowns. There was Heisman buzz about this quarterback after week one. And by the end of week two, we had the dislocated finger. So Corey, you opened with just saying Jac Collinsworth. He has been the underlying theme, even with his troubles against Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Virginia Tech. Those can't be ignored, but I still think we don't praise his highs often enough. It was a week one flash in the pan Heisman moment, but it was quite a performance. And then the Toledo game-winning drive, the Virginia Tech game-winning drives. There's a reason he'll start against USC, and presumably, unless a break class in case of emergency, start the rest of the season.
And I agree. So this is so interesting about this is that the sample size is when you look at the numbers. This is fascinating, Jack and Doug. You look at the numbers and Jac Collinsworth's balling, right? Like you look at you're like, man, this guy is really good. But when you watch the games, the pace, it's different. You're like, okay, well, this team doesn't look like it's humming. And that's what's so interesting is that I don't think we've seen a full game of just Jac Collinsworth. So that's kind of like
the closest thing to a full game have been those first 2 weeks. Florida State, where he was stellar, and then Toledo, he really only came out for the Buckner packages, which were impressive in the moment. But other than that, he played, I believe, the entire Toledo game. And that was so long ago, we forget about that fact.
Yeah. The offense feels more attacking when Buckner's in the game. It just feels like they're playing on their toes. It's more downhill. And if you think back over the years of a Brian Kelly offense, the preference is to have a running quarterback. That's the preference. It opens up about another half of the playbook that doesn't exist when you don't have a running quarterback. So if there's any reason why this whole year it feels like we need to get Buckner in the game, maybe it's Pine time. I just think in the back of the minds of Tommy Rees and Brian Kelly, they're going, there's this whole other half of the playbook that's pretty exciting if we can get to it. And is Buckner ready as a passer? No, he's not. I think he proved that against Virginia Tech. But it's still so exciting that I believe you'll continue to see it. And from what I keep hearing, there's more to be desired. There's more to be seen as a passer, and they're seeing it in practice. So maybe one day we'll see it on Saturday too.
Who wants to quietly point out the irony that Brian Kelly's offense prefers a running quarterback? And, that's right, the offensive coordinator is, Tommy Rees.
Yeah. I hear you. But did Tommy Rees win national championships there? No, I think Tommy wants a running quarterback too. He's doing the same thing.
One fact that I put together last night is Notre Dame's offense right now is averaging 5.22 yards per play. It hasn't averaged fewer than 6 since Kelly's second season in 2011. Ever since then, it's been 6 and above, even 7 in 2017. And so that really underscored for me how plotting and inconsistent this offense has been with, as you point out, a non-running quarterback.
Yeah, and we had Avery Davis on the podcast yesterday, Doug. I think you were listening in as well. The way that he described Cone is he described him like you would describe a starter, right? Like when he described Cone, you're going, okay, I can understand why the whole building keeps gravitating back towards him. But then when he talks about the skill set of Buckner, then you understand why Coach Kelly, he is going to be the man with star potential. He's the guy with the next 3 years they want to invest in, and they tried to invest in, and then it kind of became interception, rolled his ankle stepping away. You know what I mean? I think they wanted to go all in on Buckner, and it just didn't play itself out that way, and Cohn comes back in and looks great at the end of the game.
Something I do like to point out in Buckner's defense, he has played one season of football in the last 4 years. Between an MCL injury and the pandemic, he lost 2 of his last 3 years in high school. So, yes, he's going to have trouble diagnosing defenses because he hasn't seen that many defenses.
Yeah.
But as it comes to how Avery was discussing these two, it reminded me of something I wanted to ask you both. Brian Kelly has multiple times said he handled the 2016 quarterback situation poorly. Corey, you were around that team. Jack, if memory serves, you knew a few guys on that team. Kelly, in 2018, would point to his lessons learned from that and how he could manage the Wimbush to Book switch. What lessons from 2016 do you think apply now as he tries to still keep multiple quarterbacks engaged and moving forward?
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm an old school kind of guy. I think you got to just pick one quarterback and roll with it. I do see that there is this phenomenon happening. I know it doesn't seem like there's nothing new under the sun, right? But this idea that you can have multiple quarterbacks and have different packages for them, I think that's great. I think that's interesting when it comes down to the creative offenses we're seeing. But for me, as far as being a player on a team and being a receiver, trying to establish chemistry with 3 quarterbacks is difficult. And I remember just anecdotally, right? In the summer times, we'd go out and throw, and it's hard because you don't know which quarterback, if in a quarterback battle, you don't know which quarterback to throw with. So you get 100 reps in, and then the guy ends up being the second string or third string guy. And then now the starter, you don't have any chemistry with. And then when crunch time comes in the game, who does that guy go to? The guy that, they threw 100 times within the summer, it's every day. So that's kind of one of those things that I think is kind of lost when you have multiple packages. And we saw that even coach was saying that too with Brendan Clark before he entered the transfer portal, trying to get him some reps in 7-on-7 to try to take the rust off. But obviously that didn't work for Mr. Clark. He's transferring out. So, but the key thing here is with this Notre Dame quarterback room is that I think they're more focused about winning than getting, just individual stats or being the guy, which is helpful, but has, obviously been problematic for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of think that with this one, it's just a Rubik's Cube that they can't completely figure out. Like, I think what Corey just described is that they want to make one quarterback decision and go with it. And even before the Virginia Tech game, I thought you could hear that in Coach Kelly's voice. He was trying to make a call. He wanted to make one decision and go with it for the remainder of the year. And there probably was a quarter and a half of that Virginia Tech game where he's going, this is great. This is Buckner. Buckner's going to be our quarterback, and we're going to ride off into the sunset. I don't think in the back of his mind he's going, I'm going to put Cohn back into this game. And then the circumstances played out in a fashion in which I was going, oh, now this becomes a Pine game. Now Pine's going to come in as a reliever. And I don't know that there is any clear-cut evidence that makes you go, it couldn't still be any of the 3 on any given drive. Like, I still think this is he's like a manager over there for a baseball team in the World Series. And he's literally going, is it time for the reliever? Is it time to bring in this pitcher? I don't see a scenario where that doesn't exist for the remainder of the season because I think all 3 of them bring something different. I think you sort of get that shot of energy from Pine, that there may be a time where they're looking for that. I think Buckner does things as a runner that none of the other ones can do. And I think Cohn is the one that they trust to be clutch. So all 3 of those have a role, have a factor, given the way a game could play out. So my guess is this sort of quarterback carousel, this quarterback nightmare, continues all the way to the end. I don't see it going anywhere. I think it's why why Notre Dame's only a 1-loss team right now. If it weren't for this whole quarterback thing, I think they probably have more losses than this. Don't you? Like, if Cohn's not here, how many losses would this team have? Maybe starting with Florida State.
Jack, you went from World Series manager pitcher to quarterback carousel to quarterback nightmare. We went from
it's not ideal, right? It's not ideal. Like, for Kelly, for Reese, for you, Corey Robinson as a receiver, nobody wants this scenario, but I don't know how you escape it or avoid it. There's no answer to it at this point.
So in that respect, Jack, you're saying it is similar to 2016 when they couldn't quite come to a decision, whereas in 2018 there was one switch made and that was never second guessed.
Yeah.
This year it's just going to be second guessing, third guessing, fourth guessing, so on down the line, probably each week, including Saturday night against USC.
I think it could. I mean, if Cohn's in there and he plays perfect the whole game, it's awesome. If he throws an interception, let's say he throws 2 interceptions, can you two look me in the eye and go, they're not going to bring in another one of these quarterbacks? I can almost guarantee it.
It's different when you say second guessing, third guessing, fourth guessing, or in the game plan. Because, if you look at the Buckner packages with the 2 back, like that's in the game plan, right? So if you're saying if what you're arguing is true about this carousel or relief pitcher analogy, if that's the case, then you could say we're going to start off with Cohn. Then when it's lagging, we'll put a shot of Buckner, we'll put a shot of Pine in, and then Buckner is going to tire out the defensive line. The pass rush is going to get tired late in the game when we need a pocket presence. With our O-line that has how many replacements, throughout the whole season, how many starting lineups have we seen? Then we'll put back in Cohn. He'll finish the game. We'll get clutch with very little pressure on him, and he'll deliver us. If that's the game plan, then that's different than second guessing or third guessing.
Yeah, well, I think it's always the game plan until you go in and you have a big mistake, and that sort of has been the pattern. And you can say that it's as a result of not having good pass protection, which is real, and getting hit in the ear hole, which is real. And I mean, even the Virginia Tech game, it was sort of sack, and a lot of people are going, he's got to be able to move and avoid the pressure, talking about Cohn, and create a little magic on his own. So then you go, okay, well, this is the type of game that makes sense for Buckner. The next thing you know, Buckner comes in and goes right down the field. It's like, oh, this is perfect for Buckner, but he's got a pass, and now he's throwing easy interceptions. Now you go back to Cohn. You know what I'm saying? It's like their skill sets are all so different that I don't know how you get out of this cycle. I just don't know how you do.
It will be interesting to see how that plays out, especially against some porous defenses coming up. Notre Dame has faced 4 top 20 defenses in yards per play allowed. They're about to face 5 that are lower than 80 in the country. So things are going to improve for this offense, no matter who's at quarterback. Who would you two anticipate in the next 6 weeks breaking out? It could even be somebody who was once upon a time productive but hasn't been this year. But next 6 weeks, who would you see coming through?
On the offense?
Presumably, because that's where we're at right now, and that is the struggling part of this team for the most part.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting question. I would have to go with one of the receivers. For me, I think, the guy that I really want to see step into a bigger role. It's not like a breakout is saying 0 yards to 1,000 yards. It's not going to be like that. But I think just Kevin Austin being able to capitalize on some of those one-on-one matchups in the boundary. We've seen flashes, and I just need to see that more consistently. And I think down the stretch, we're going to see more of that, or I would hope to see more of that. And that's what this offense needs. But he would be my one offensive breakout star if I had to pick one.
Yeah, he's a good one. I'd go Braden Lindsey. I just think Lindsey, every time we meet with the coaching staff, I get the sense that they want to take some more shots. Like that shots is in their mind. They're trying to think of the moment to go deep. And I know Lindsey had a drop where he basically ran right into the sun. Corey could probably speak to that better, but he's looking right over the stadium and the football is coming in. And we had him on the podcast and he wasn't going to give it up. He wasn't going to go, I dropped it because of the sun, but you could tell that it was in his eye. Then he came back and caught a touchdown. Was that last week, a couple of weeks ago? So he rebounded. I just think that they're looking for shots. And at some point, he becomes the guy, just the speed that he has. So I do think the deep stuff will come. And my guess is it'll come the second half of the year to Lindsey.
I get both of those. I'm going to cheat and suggest a breakout in that he hasn't shined yet this year. Kyren Williams is going to have a month, be it the next 4 weeks, the last 4 weeks of the season. Kyren Williams will not have his presumably final year at Notre Dame be some 600 or 700 yard season. He is going to dominate a few games. Just the way the offensive line is coming together, the way the upcoming defenses are that much worse than Wisconsin and Cincinnati and Purdue and Toledo. Kyren Williams will have a moment before this year is over, and presumably, I'm going to argue, multiple moments to put together a month.
It's interesting. I haven't seen this year look anything like last year, and it's probably mostly just because of the offensive line just doesn't create a natural push. There's There's not a 2 and 3 yard push right off the line. And so you've had to see Kyron take over in certain runs. And I think we've seen that in games where it's like he just decides he's not going down on that play. He'll break 2 or 3 tackles. And so if he is going to have those breakout moments, I think it's going to have to be on his own shoulders, just breaking a few tackles and making it happen, because it hasn't been the same offensive line.
It'll be curious to see that offensive line coming forward. Corey, you mentioned how many offensive lines have we seen? For all but 2 games in Brian Kelly's first 11 years, Notre Dame started 4 left tackles. This year alone, Notre Dame has started 4 left tackles. It's absurd. But now it sounds like Joe Alt's going to be at left tackle and Andrew Kristofic's going to be at left guard. And maybe that's enough to give Kyron and the offense some more consistency moving forward.
And Carmody, a tight end.
I couldn't wrap my mind around that when I first saw it. It's nominal. It's got I don't expect him to be catching any passes, but boy, wouldn't that be a package if suddenly Carmody's in the flat.
I mean, we know about his basketball prowess, right, Jack? I mean, it's not entirely unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the player that everybody's so excited about is Joe Alt. He's the one that that's a name that I've never heard anybody, when you bring it up, not go, oh, he's going to be a great one here at Notre Dame. He's young, and so he's a true freshman, right? And so they were looking for that package to bring him in. Corey, what number was he wearing? 45? When they would bring him in there at that extra tight end spot. And I think he did well coming in, had a few great blocks. And his role, I think, is just going to continue to grow. Young guy, but everybody says he looks like an NFLer.
It's interesting because with this O-line, it's funny because we hear about, the running backs being another offensive lineman, right? With Kyron Williams being able to pick up protections. And that's kind of something the whole running back room actually prides itself on. I don't think I've been around the Notre Dame team where you have multiple offensive linemen being fullback or tight end, Joe Alt, Carmody. It's like, oh, we'll just move them around. We know that we can move them around on the line, but it's pretty interesting that we're like, okay, well, these guys could basically, move around outside of just the traditional definition of offensive line, which at being that size, like 6'7", over 300 pounds, talk about athletes. So I actually am very excited to see Carmody in the tight end position.
Notre Dame has taken that old Stanford jumbo model and maybe taken that Stanford model and put it on steroids. Oh, you think you're going to have 5 offensive linemen and 3 tight ends? We're just going to have 8 offensive linemen. Like, what are you going to do about that? But Jack, you mentioned Joe Alt. It's such an interesting arc. In the preseason, in September, nobody at Notre Dame was thinking Joe Alt 2021. They weren't even thinking Joe Alt 2022. This is a guy who was playing tight end in high school. When Notre Dame started recruiting him, he weighed 245 pounds. They were thinking Joe Alt's going to be really good in 2023. He's going to really be a piece. But now he's your starting left tackle, and maybe he's usurped Blake Fisher already for that long-term role. I don't know. It depends on when we get Blake Fisher back. But it did make me wonder, and I wanted to ask both of you, who have you seen this year? And we've already covered Joe Alt, but if you want to double down on him, who have you seen this year that you've thought, boy, that's going to be a piece in 2022, offensive, defensive, wherever it may be, somebody you weren't expecting that you already see as a future building block?
That's a good one. That's a good one. To finish up on that Joe Alt point, I think if Fisher comes back, that is only gravy on top. I mean, because then you can maybe put one at right tackle, you put the other at left tackle. I think that's really what Coach Kelly likes to do right now. Is he likes to be able to bring them in as that extra tight end, get them reps. I mean, how many times have you heard him say, figure out if a guy's ready for the bright lights of Notre Dame Stadium, the bright lights of Broadway that comes with it. And you can get those reps without the pressure. And that's what they did with Joe Alt, was sort of eased him into knowing what it's like to be a part of the offense without the pressure. Now he's ready for the pressure. Who do I think could be a big player come? The defense is going to lose a lot. I mean, they're going to lose a whole lot of players potentially.
There is an obvious answer on defense. I'm wondering if you're going to get there. If I need to walk JD Bertrand, 58 tackles already, and he wasn't supposed to be a starter this year. He was supposed to be 25 snaps a game.
He's an easy one. Corey, where are you leaning with this one?
Yeah, I was going to the D line. I was thinking about Lacey and Cross. I've been really impressed with both of their impact and just like their play as far as just a skill set. We know about the defensive line at Notre Dame. I mean, a lot of great D linemen come through in D. But I just love their get off. They're so fast, they're explosive, and they're disruptive, right? And like you mentioned, a lot of people are going to be leaving this defense. And to me, the defensive line just seems like it just reloads.
When we discuss Notre Dame's resurgence since 2017, I think of the defensive line depth. Corey, you played with some great defensive linemen at Notre Dame, but even then, that 2015 team, the 2014 team that might have had a certain run for a while, they never had the defensive line depth that you're referring to now, that it just reloads. You look at Lacey and Cross as next year's possible starters, and Notre Dame won't worry at all.
Yeah, and JD Bertrand, for me, it's like this is one of those things where he's already there. Like he was leading every game. I'm just like, where is JD? He's flying around every tackle. I just see his number. I'm like, man, this guy's everywhere. And like you mentioned, he was a special teams guy. Is he going to fill a role? Maybe he's just going to have a little bit of an impact. Then he becomes the guy. He leads the team in tackles, and you're just like, man, this guy's already there. He's already a core contributor. I think as far as going into that space next year, like I said, I think D-line will probably be one of the areas, just because to me, it's like it's the most interesting. It's like an octopus. There's just like so many tentacles, and all of them are dangerous. So it's really fun to watch that D-line. I also just love linemen. So I think I'm kind of biased there.
Yeah. Cam Hart's another one that I'm starting to believe in. I think that the switching him from the boundary to the field side did so much to create comfort for him. And I think you have to give a whole bunch of props with that move to Coach Freeman, because Freeman realized really for a lot of things he had learned from Cincinnati that he might be better served if you put him over on the wide side of the field. He's a former wide receiver, right? So it just looks like with the ball in the air, having extra time over on the wide side to see it and react to it, he's creating interceptions. He just looks comfortable. I think some of those guys, like even Diggs with the Cowboys, guys that have played receiver in their background and have those ball skills, every time the football's in the air, Kyle Hamilton, like they believe it's their football and they're just going to go attack it like they're playing offense again. And so I see some of those things with Cam Hart. He's a long guy over there. I think they're teaching him the position. My guess is he has a very big second year coming back next season. It would be his senior year. I get all their classes confused at this point, but I believe will be his senior year.
It's curious. Go ahead, Corey.
I'll say another easy one is Buckner. I think that's very straightforward.
I don't know if he's surprised in 2021, but you're certain
in the spring, remember in the spring game, we were sitting there. It's like, okay, is it going to be Pine? Is it going to be Buckner? And then he comes in and does amazing things. And then so yeah, early on, he was a bit of a surprise. Now it's not so much.
Yeah.
It will be a surprise to me if he's not the starter, though. Certainly Brian Kelly will trumpet a quarterback competition in the spring. I do find it curious in a season where the defense was lampooned for the first couple of weeks. Here we are talking about all the defensive contributors that look so good, especially moving forward. There's been a real quick growth spurt under Freeman in the last 2 months.
There has been. And this year, this has been one of the more impressive Coach Kelly, Coach Reese, Coach Freeman coaching jobs, just because I don't think from a player standpoint, from a talent, guys that are ready to play sort of top shelf college football, this probably wasn't the year where they felt like they had a surplus. This just was not that season. And then you had injuries at the beginning of the year, which piled onto that. But their ability to piece this thing back together and sort of duct tape what became the holes with the offensive line and bringing extra men in and figuring out a way to win these games that probably should have been losses if you really sort of got them in private, just figuring out a way to go gut them out. I think it's been one of the more impressive coaching jobs that I can remember. I think it's really fitting too that Coach Kelly passes Newt Rockne for the all-time winningest coach in a year where he just had to grit and gut it out.
With a backup quarterback. Brian Kelly needs to break that record using a backup quarterback.
Right. Yeah, with Pine coming in, third string left tackle, third string quarterback, it just felt like the right year, the right time.
Before we get out of here, one of us should ask, what are you two predicting for the final 6 weeks? Is Notre Dame going to finish the year 11-1?
Look, I'm trying to get through 1 week at a time. So.
Corey, you're not anymore. You can get off the talking points.
It's just so funny because, like I said, this team it's the closest thing to a reality TV show that I've seen. I mean, every week it comes down to like the very end. There's so much drama. There's so many injuries. There are just so many like heroes that then the next week, it's just like I don't understand. This is one of the most fascinating, entertaining teams to watch. Just the internal dynamics. It's like its own, narrative. It's its own theater. It's beautiful as a fan and heart-wrenching. It's tragic and exhilarating. But I think as far as week to week, like I'm just trying to stay alive, quite honestly. I will say, though, I think the key thing, in my opinion, is going to be like just with Michael Mayer. If when he's in the game, like it's just we all talk about how incredible he is. If he can just stay healthy, oh my goodness, like the offense looks so different without him. So if you have a healthy Michael Mayer, I think we're gonna see a lot more wins, right? But man, I get so nervous when he's on the sideline. I just get so nervous, Doug.
Yeah. I think he'll be able to come back and play in some fashion, right? I mean, the bye week seemed to have come at the perfect time, I would think. Now, groins could be tricky too, especially cutting in the open field like he does. What do you think there, Doug?
Well, like Brian Kelly is the most optimistic person in the world when it comes to player health. But he did say Mayer looked 100% this week. And to me, that said he's playing. Like we saw Virginia Tech as a game we could win without him, barely, and make his bye week really a 2 or 3 week stretch, which is the right way to handle that injury. If Mayer doesn't practice this week until Thursday, then he basically gets 3 weeks off, which should hopefully, for his sake, get that groin healthy. I don't ever trust Brian Kelly's optimism when it comes to players, because I think a player could have his foot amputated and Kelly would say, he'll be back in 3 weeks. But maybe Mayer is there, and USC's defense is certainly susceptible to some big gains for a tight end like that.
I think that they can win out. To answer your original question, like this, given what they've gotten through, the Cincinnati game was the hardest on the schedule, just given the way that everything was shaping up. To go to Virginia Tech to win, that would have been another one that I would have been considerably nervous about. They're going to beat USC. I think they can beat UNC. I think they can beat Stanford. To me, that they absolutely can win out from here. And if I was in that coaching office, if I was a player on that team, the expectation would be winning out. So is it possible they catch another loss somewhere along the way, given just so much variety at the quarterback position? There's every week it seems like there's something that they're going through. Yeah, it's possible they could drop another game, but to me, the expectation would be to win out. I think that there's every reason to believe they will.
11-1 or 10-2 for a year when you were rebuilding/reloading. There's worse things in life.
Oh my gosh, it'd be huge, right? I mean, if they could get out of this thing with one loss, with all the other teams that have lost at this point, are they in that conversation again?
Jack, no, stop.
Are they in it?
No.
What would have to happen for them to be back in it, Doug?
Georgia has to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game.
Right.
The Big Ten has to cannibalize itself, because right now you have 4 teams, or is it 5 teams? 5 teams that are above Notre Dame in that conversation between Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Michigan. So that has to completely self-destruct. Mm-hmm. Have Oklahoma win out. So at that point, you're at Georgia, Oklahoma, Cincinnati. And then it's a chaos question, Notre Dame or Oregon or 2-loss Alabama. I think your biggest 2 items are Georgia beating Alabama for the SEC title, and the Big Ten has to completely cannibalize itself. There are 5 teams there right now with genuine applicable playoff aspirations.
Yeah. So the key is just the big win for this season would be just re-entering the conversation. Just putting yourself as a potential maybe to get X from the playoff, but just being in the conversation would be the win.
First playoff rankings come out in 2 weeks. I think that's November 2nd, maybe. Notre Dame will be somewhere between 9th and 13th. And yeah, you just assume natural attrition, and Notre Dame's going to move up to 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and then you're in that conversation, like you said.
Yeah. What a weird year it's been. Doug, you've been doing this forever. Can you remember a year that's been this all over the place?
The one that does come to mind, and I don't mean to bring up bad memories for somebody here, is the 2014, shot out of a cannon, great team, great looking, and then injuries just cripple the defense. Notre Dame has managed to survive those injuries across the board this year, and they're more on the offense. But that's the one that comes to mind. And going into these next 6 weeks, Notre Dame might be an injury or two away from such a problem again. There's more depth now. We were discussing the defensive line depth that Corey never got to experience as a player, as much as there were singular talents. Notre Dame is in a better position to handle that kind of injury rash, but that 2014 team was so good, and then it just never had a chance to finish the season strong. And that's where I do have those memories of this one.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. It's sort of been the opposite of that one in terms of they shoot out of a cannon. I guess they shot out of a cannon in both of them, but this one was one where it was like even when they were shooting out of the cannon, you never quite felt like they were shooting very far. You know,
there's never enough gunpowder in the cannon.
There wasn't very much gunpowder. You were worried if the cannon could shoot again next weekend. Yeah, so all good. The fact that it's a one-loss team, I think every Notre Dame fan can celebrate that at this point. Even though doesn't it always feel like the sky's falling? Even one loss, no matter what the circumstance, sky's coming down on heads.
Well, Jack, you're giving me a chance to ask Corey something I would love to ask. I have all sorts of fans and readers. Oh, Notre Dame's out of the playoff. Plan for 2022. Bench Cone, bench Pine, play Buckner, play all the freshmen. How would that resonate in a locker room, Corey, if Notre Dame clearly was like, well, we can lose 2 more this year. We're already out of it. What would that say in the locker room?
I don't think that it would ever happen at Notre Dame. You know, I think Notre Dame's one of those teams. First of all, if you're playing for Notre Dame, you have a certain pride associated with that, especially now with this team. They understand what it means to wear the monogram. So I don't think you're ever going to get in a scenario where you're just going to throw the season or tank or whatever words you want to use. There's a pride associated with that. But the important thing here is this ND team, you guys mentioned it. They're probably the most resilient team, you know, that I've seen around. Just think about that, like I said, the reality TV show kind of drama that's been around this season. They're resilient. All the injuries that they've had, and they have the depth to back it up, as you mentioned, Doug. So when I see that, I think that in itself is pretty interesting. I think survival at this point is a pretty interesting indicator of just how good this team is, or how great Notre Dame's come along to be able to endure that many injuries and still be a one-loss team. If they can continue that, to me, that's more, instead of this one season, that this is going to be a marker of saying, okay, well, let's talk about the Notre Dame program. Because think about the other top programs that have had similar kind of drop-offs or injuries. You know, we had a lot of we saw as fans a lot of players go to the league that were really good last year, right? Not every team can just reload, and there's a couple teams, you know, in the ACC who they just couldn't reload, right? So that's kind of my point. Is for me, this year is less about this team particularly, which obviously fans probably don't want to hear that. But I think as far as just like the overall health of the program, this is very encouraging for Notre Dame. But this season, I'm just like 1 week at a time. Let's beat USC.
Yeah, but I think your sentiment there with the 1 week at a time, Corey, I just get the sense that is shared by Coach Kelly. Don't you get that sense that in his brain, it's like every week he sort of comes back to the table and goes, okay, what do we need to protect? Is it the left tackle? Okay, let's come up with a plan to send help that way. I just feel like he is sort of preoccupied by so many things that he's trying to fix on the fly that he's never really living in the future like he would in a normal week. There's never really a comfort that the basics are covered. I think he's always feeling like he needs to give help where help is, you know, most urgent, and then to be able to move on to the next task, if that makes sense. And that's why it's been such an impressive coaching job from my perspective. And I think if you ever got him in private, it's probably, you know, assuming that they could finish out the year the way they've been able to piece it together, I think it'd be one of his proudest, to be honest with you.
And that goes back to where we started, Jack. The quarterback has to change sometimes every week because they're not able to think ahead to November. They have to figure out what is it going to take to beat SC. Maybe it's a different quarterback setup. What's going to take to beat North Carolina? And maybe that it all does go back to that. That's just the variable this year that they have to figure out every week. Just like they have to figure out the whole game plan every week, more so than most seasons.
It is. And if you want to look ahead to 2022, I think the defense is going to lose a ton of players, right? Like we were mentioning. So it's probably going to be very heavily reliant on transfers to come in and fill some of those positions. I don't think you can completely rely on all these underclassmen coming up, filling roles and becoming a winning defense. I think you're going to see a lot of transfers coming. I think the offensive line will be considerably better, considerably improved next year, and then Buckner steps in as the quarterback. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that 2022 is all roses. There's going to be a lot they need to work on for that as well.
We can debate the 2022 roster in all, let's say 6 or 7 weeks.
There's going to be plenty of debate there. But yeah, I hear you. There's plenty left on the 2021 boat at this point. Cool. Are we going to wrap this thing up? I don't know where we are on time or what the heck is it?
I think we're going to be told we ran a little long, so get us out of here, Jack.
All right, let's do it. Fellas, it's been a pleasure. We'll go ahead and clip that part out right there. USC, Notre Dame. Corey, send us out with one little nugget on the USC Notre Dame rivalry. There's so many rivalries on this Notre Dame schedule, but this one always feels a little bit more special.
It's USC. It's Southern Cal. It's Notre Dame. This is one of the most historic rivalries, two historic programs. You know, in my mind, rivalries have to be, one, long-standing. Can't just happen, the past couple of years. Has to go back. This one goes way back. You have to both be good. You can't just have a one-sided affair. And USC is good, and Notre Dame's really good too. So I think historically, when you look at the parity between these two teams, that's what adds to this rivalry. And then lastly, I think great rivals have to mean something to people. They have to have significance. And I don't know if you've ever talked, if you just talk story with any college football fan, they generally have pretty strong feelings, I should say, against, either for or against Notre Dame or USC. And they don't even have any allegiances to those teams. They just either don't like them or they love them. And then when you talk about a Notre Dame fan, if you ask a Notre Dame fan about Southern Cal, if you ask a Southern Cal fan about Notre Dame, those are amplified feelings. So for me, it checks every box of a great rivalry. And then you add in primetime under the lights. It just doesn't get any better as a fan experience.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some eyeballs on this game. I really do, man. I think 7:30, prime time, Notre Dame, USC is the best USC team ever. No, but I just think there's something about these two brands on one field that people can't help but watch. Doug, Corey, thank you guys so much for doing it. ND on NBC Podcast, Saturday night, 7:30 p.m., Notre Dame SC.